مرحبا واهلا وسهلا فيكم بهالسبيشال سيشن من شركة AAB World بالاشتراك مع شركة بلاك ماجيك. بهالويبينار اليوم رح نجرب يعني اكيد رح شركة بلاك ماجيك رح يقولوا لنا ويعلمونا ويفرجونا الطرق يلي فينا نستخدم فيها كاميراتنا مع الايكو سيستم يلي هو الاتم بالمجمل، سواء اتم ميني ولا اتم ميني برو ولا اتم ميني برو اي اس او ولا اكستريم ولا اكستريم اي اس او ولا حتى التلفزيون فيرجن من الاتمز، كيف فينا نستخدمهم مع كاميراتنا ايا كانت هالكاميرات لنقدر نطلع ونبث فيهم لايف، سواء لبودكاست ولا جيمنج شانل ولا حتى نحن عم نقوم بتغطية ايفنت وبدنا نعمل لايف. هالسيشن كتير سبيشل، رح يكون فيها فترة بالآخر فقرة نجاوب فيها على أسئلتكم، فإذا عندكم أي أسئلة بليز ما تترددوا إنكم تسألوها ونحن رح نكتبها، وبالتالي رح نوديها لمستر توم يلي رح يكون معنا من شركة بلاك ماجيك ونسألكم هالأسئلة ونسأل هالأسئلة بالنيابة عنكم ونخليه يجاوب عنا. بالإضافة بحب أذكركم إنه شركة AAB الأسبوع المقبل بإذن الله عندهم سايبر ديلز ويك يلي رح يكون على الويب سايت تبعهم، بس في ديلز على مدة أسبوع كامل، وطبعا ضمن هالديلز في ديلز على برودكتس من بلاك ماجيك، فكتير مهم تضلكم ذاكرين هالموضوع وتدخلوا وتفعلوا النوتيفيكيشنز على بروفايل AAB على الانستغرام ليوصلكم نوتيفيكيشنز اول ما تبدا السايبر ديلز. رح عيد بالانجليزي اللي بيسمعوا انجليزي، اللي بيحكوا انجليزي. Hello, my name is George Sarabai. I'm here from AAB World with Blackmagic Design. We have a very special guest today, which is Mr. Tom from the UK, from Blackmagic, who is gonna lead this session, and he's gonna present to all of you how you would be able to use any camera you have with the Atom ecosystem to start a gaming channel, broadcast, podcast, or even if you want to just broadcast an event. So whatever your uses may be for live broadcasting, this session is very important, and it is here to answer most questions that people have about this kind of setup. At the end of the session, we will have a Q&A session where you guys ask all your questions, and we will in turn send them to Mr. Tom, who would be generous enough to answer them for us, and then I can translate them back to you in English. Moreover, please don't forget, next week, AAB has a Cyber Deals Week on their website only, where you can go and get amazing deals on more than 600 or 700 products. Of course, included in those products are Blackmagic products. So it's a win-win. It's a great webinar today. After that, you have cyber deals coming up. So it's a beautiful, beautiful week, let's say, for Blackmagic heads like myself. So, Mr. Tom, how are you?
Great, I'm good. Thank you, George, for the introduction. I had everything you said about the webinar and what we'll be talking about today about is very accurate. It's almost as if you were at the other sessions present I was doing. So great, that's right. Greetings from the cold and dark Liverpool. So it's 8 a.m. here now, but happy to be there in the warmest part of the countries, even if it of the world, even if it's only in this form remotely. So a few words about myself. My name is Tom. I work for Blackmagic Design. I have been with the company for about a year, and my position is technical sales specialist and I'm responsible for camera products. So that means, of course, studio cameras, broadcast cameras, film cameras, etc. But I'm not only just Blackmagic in terms of the experience. I've worked on many sets, be it short films, feature films, music videos, corporate videos. So I've got quite a few of them behind my belt, and I've had a chance to work with majority of the industry standard brands. Before getting to Blackmagic, I was also freelancing as a DOP, as a first camera assistant, and the camera operator, and I started the experience with film in the film school here in the UK. But before that, I also, like many probably of you, worked a lot with photography, so doing loads of landscape and travel photography, etc. So without further ado, let's get to the webinar. So I need to share my screen, so bear with me a minute while I move around the windows. Right, so here should be on the screen. You should have the presentation now. By the way, the chat is switched off, so any questions you have, there's a Q&A section. I see something's already been asked here, but I won't be myself looking at the Q&A section during the presentation. So we'll get to it at the end of this presentation. Well, I will try to answer everything live. Hopefully I will know the answers. So here on the screen is my name. As you can see, the surname may be a bit strange to you, but I come from Poland. And like many of Polish people, travel to the UK at a certain point in my life. The presentation today will be, although it is about studio cameras, of course we have two models, the Studio Camera 4K Plus and 4K Pro. The presentation itself, of course, the cameras have been released quite a few months ago now, so the presentation is not solely about the new cameras, but about the applications and the setups and how it incorporates, how it works well with ATEM ecosystem. So hopefully it will be quite informative for you as well. So we've got the agenda on the screen. So I'll just run through it quickly. So we begin with a growth of small production, where we'll look at, as I said, a common application, the types of live productions in the small, especially small budget productions that are operating. Then we look at studio cameras. So as a whole, what we mean by studio cameras and what we need from a studio featured camera. Then a product overview. This is where we specifically talk about the features of the studio camera, some common features and the differences between the two models. In the key workflow section, we specifically look at the three main kind of setups, depending on what camera and what infrastructure you use, so how you can effectively build your setup. Then, of course, the summary and, as mentioned, Q&A section, where I'll try to answer any questions that you may have. So I would like to begin by asking you to think about why you're actually here and what you like to take out of this presentation. I'm sure some of you already may be involved in production of podcasts, delivering education or corporate communication, or covering conferences and other live events, or perhaps you're looking to equip your small studio or production facility, whether it be from scratch or upgrade an existing one, and you'd like to find out more, learn more about studio featured products. And if any of these applies to you, and especially if you're already an ATEM mini switcher user, then we believe that this presentation will be for you. As the studio cameras, we'll be talking about how they were designed to overcome the limitations imposed by using mirrorless cameras, digital stills photography cameras, and camcorders for live productions, and how these cameras can actually replace them very effectively. So as mentioned, the first section is growth with small production. And so here we will look at some statistics first, and then we go into the common applications. So one thing is certain is that when looking at the statistics, we've seen an immense explosion in small production for live events. So that's streaming, mainly streaming, of course. The statistics are telling us that the video market as a whole generally is showing a staggering growth. The video streaming specifically, it's not just the video market industry as a whole, but streaming specifically is predicted to be worth over $124 billion by the year 2025. To put in perspective, in 2016, the same market was estimated to have been worth 30 billion US dollars. So that's a huge predicted growth within only 9 years. We're more than halfway through it, and we witnessed it ourselves. So, for example, according to YouTube, live stream in the US alone has increased by 250%, so 2.5-fold from year on year, from 2019 to 2020. So only 1 year difference. The streaming time, the consumption of streaming materials has increased 2.5-fold. Of course, we know what's behind it. We know the main driving point here, the driving force being the pandemic and the multiple lockdowns imposed as a result of it. We seem to be getting somewhere to normal, but of course, every time we think that we on the last straight home, new news break and new lockdowns are imposed. So do we think that this will all end during the pandemic and people abandon, the streaming market and streaming videos and return to the previous way of consuming media? Well, again, we don't think so, and there are many reasons we'll talk about in a few moments. But according to GWI market research, a quarter of reviewers will continue to stream more post-COVID, and 81% of students are reporting that digital learning, including video, really helps them learn and retain knowledge. Of course, I'm sure a big part of it is the generational difference. We see that people tend to now look for videos rather than read manuals or read articles, and that be it educational or from news, etc. But that's also another changes going from pre-recorded to live streaming, as it gives that extra element of touch with the audience. So on the screen, you see some typical applications where customers of ATEM Mini Switcher series are already operating. I'm sure that some of you may already be involved in any of these, or you may just be looking to take your first steps within these applications. So of course, podcast and social media, I mean, that's quite big. It always has been. Originally, we had probably larger companies delivering these forms of materials that were originally pre-recorded, but now it's actually changing. We see radio stations that are entering the video market as well, but also I'm sure any of you will have some big names or brands or channels in mind that deliver this type of content. Platforms such as YouTube, they of course provide huge opportunities for entrepreneurs, for producers, for anyone who wants to grow the business, be it a specifically video-related business, or whether video is and streaming is only a part of helping to retain the growth of the business. So that's why the corporate applications are seen, as we've seen companies using the streaming devices, streaming technology, be it for general meetings, continuing to operate business from the lockdown, so meeting with shareholders and stakeholders, but also interviews, etc. Remote learning and lectures, of course, this has been as well huge since the pandemic. So educational facilities, colleges, universities, schools, they had to take the necessary shift. Unlike some of the other applications, they did not have the choice, so they had to adapt to the changing conditions. So they invested in the equipment and in the technology, and continued to deliver educational content without being able to have the students there in the auditorium, in the lecture theaters, etc. But there are also emerging new platforms that operate strictly and even before the lockdown, they operated strictly on live streamed educational content. Then we have e-gaming, of course. It doesn't really need a lot of introduction. Platforms like Twitch and even YouTube, they are big on e-gaming. We see more streamers streaming their gaming, but also that also translates to more viewers that are more engaged. And this, again, is not just pre-recorded, but it's a live stream. Outside small studios, we find parts of live events market that have made the necessary shift to virtual events for corporate activities such as customer outreach, but internal communication and company general meetings. So I think one of the examples would be could be this seminar. So I've had a chance to travel around Africa and Europe and Middle East, being in Poland 1 hour and then 2 hours, go 2 hours later, delivering these materials to viewers in Zimbabwe, then back to Kuwait, Croatia, UK, etc., all allowing, of course, to reach you directly and interact with you, with your viewers, answer your questions live in real time. Performance events, again, these have, the large mainstream events have always been broadcasted live, but we were talking about national, international, or national scale. So huge music events, huge music festivals, and big arena shows, and the biggest cultural events in countries. But then again, since the pandemic, and which continues to throughout now, we have seen more localized events, local music festivals, theaters, that also made that shift. In order to continue to operate, they made the shift to live streaming. But now that the theaters reopened and music venues reopened, and we see live events continuing in a normal matter, the traditional way, they continue also to live stream, because they realize that they are able to reach wider audience this way, doing it in a hybrid form. A few things that these applications have in common. So one would be, we could say that they invested in the equipment and made the necessary switch to continue to operate, to survive on the market. So one would be to secure, the first step was to secure continuity of business and operation. But the second stage that we see now is that once that has been kind of secured, is that establishing a higher quality level and making it more professional. Until now, there's been a lack of dedicated studio cameras in this price point to satisfy these needs. So users have been adopting stills, DSLR, and mirrorless cameras and entry-level camcorders to deliver this content. But of course, this comes with a lot of operational inefficiencies and a lot of compromises, be it in the form of actual functionality or ergonomics. And another, of course, another disadvantage is the lack of full integration with ATEM switches as well. So let's have a look at specifically at what users are missing, or what actually they need from studio cameras, and what you are missing when you use a DSLR or mirrorless cameras for delivering your live video content. Remember, by the way, that these cameras, of course, are optimized for stills photography. But what do you actually need for studio camera? Well, one thing would be a large viewfinder to quickly assess and adjust shots. DSLRs have got small flip-out screens and small fixed viewfinders. They're not ideal for, they're good for photography, but they're not ideal for demanding conditions in live productions. Then balanced audio for professional microphones. First of all, they would have usually cameras have very basic audio connections. We're talking about mini jacks or mini jacks with poor quality preamps. Then full-size HDMI ports. This is extremely rare in this kind of cameras. Instead, we see mini HDMI or micro HDMI connectors, which are far from ideal. Not only are they more difficult to purchase because you need to go with the specific reseller rather than having access to widely available HDMI cables, but also they then tend to be more expensive and they tend to break and disconnect easily. Studio features like tally and talkback, of course, you don't see them in this type of cameras. So tally is that red light that shows on the camera, red or green or no light, depending on the mode that you're in. It shows the operator that the camera is either being preview mode by the director or it's actually on air and delivering live feed. But it also helps the presenter. It avoids a situation when working with multi-camera setups where a presenter is presenting to a wrong camera. So this way, everyone knows which camera to look at. And tally is the intercom feature that allows a production crew to communicate with the director, with a director's room behind the scenes. So you will see the headsets that operators often wear, and they're able to talk behind the scenes without interrupting and affecting the live show, the event that's happening in front of the camera. When it comes to camcorders, the situation is nearly identical as with mirrorless and DSLR cameras. So we see the same things, small screens, often lack of professional balanced audio connectors, although it's slightly more common at this stage. Large full-size HDMI connector, again, maybe slightly more common, but as the professional SDI connectors are only really present in the highest and highest priced camcorders. And one thing that both the stills cameras, these DSLRs and mirrorless cameras have in common with these camcorders is the lack of integration with ATEM switches. So you don't have the camera, the very powerful camera control connectivity and functionality when using third-party camcorders and cameras to deliver your programs. Of course, there are a lot of accessories that you can add to these types of cameras, but they only satisfy part of the functionality that you expect, and they come at extra point, and they further hinder the ergonomics of the camera of your setup if you use a lot of accessories. Sorry, I got an itchy nose when I talk for some reason. I think it's my mustache is somehow tingling. Right, so now all these points start to define what we need from a studio and live events camera. So what functions you need and what functionality you expect. So what do we mean by studio cameras? Traditionally, studio cameras up until now, when you talk about studio cameras, you think, you imagine these large productions, very mainstream, large, high-end, large budget productions. They often use cameras, for example, as a broadcast camera system with a fiber connector, converters, and fiber connectivity, and the largest item or largest mixers available. It uses usually a single fiber cable, which is a multi-core cable, very thick and quite heavy, to handle bi-directional signals between the camera and the switcher. So not just video and audio, but camera control, power for the camera, talkback tally, camera control, and power. Yeah. So these are all the protocols that it supports, and it increases efficiency and productivity. And the length of these type of cables can be up to 2 kilometers. So it's ideal for shows like cricket shows, polo, of course, any sport events, golf, football stadiums, anywhere where you need good quality, full resolution, and really long cable runs. But these actually quite, despite what you may think, these actually form quite a niche of requirements. We only have limited of production studio covering this type of events. A much wider range of studio and live productions have a less demanding requirements. For example, where professional SDI connectivity or even more affordable systems using HDMI connectivity are ideal. So we're talking obviously much less than 2 kilometers length, but we see that way more, much larger scale of the productions actually sit in these range. So we can see, if you look at the slide, if you look from the top to bottom, you see the stages, kind of the shelves, if you may, that define the budget of the production. Left to right, it explains, like in any of these scales, it kind of performs the setups that you would use. So based on around a specific infrastructure. So from the top, we're going from fiber to SDI to HDMI, of course, the camera, and the mixer that you would use with it. So with the amount of productions requirements setting on that second and first, so from the bottom, first and second stage, we now have the studio cameras 4K Plus and Studio Camera 4K Pro that have been designed to bring that broadcast style studio and live features to smaller productions and satisfy those needs. So let's have a look at specifically at the features of these cameras. So we'll now look at some common aspects, what these cameras have in common, and then we look at the differences between these two cameras. So of course, in the heart, in the center of a camera lies its sensor. The sensor in these cameras is a high performance sensors capturing native live 4K images for us sending HD content when working with ATEM mini-series switches, and of course full 4K when working with other members of ATEM switcher family, mainly based on the SDI infrastructure. And the sensor is exactly the same as we see in the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. So a lot of you may already be familiar with it. A highly praised sensor for the quality of images that it delivers, especially for the color reproduction with the Gen 5 color science, the reproduction of skin tones, and 13 stops of dynamic range, which allows to work in conditions, in highly contrasted conditions with a lot of bright highlights and dark shadows without sacrificing and having to choose kind of which ones you want to focus on. Camera, of course, are able to record Blackmagic Raw into external SSD drives via USB-C connectors, and feature dual native ISO functionality, which I'll talk about in a few slides from now. But in front of the sensor lies the lens, of course, and the lens system. So we're using the Micro Four Thirds system, the MFD lens system, again known from the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. So you're starting to see the trends that anyone who already uses the Pocket 4K camera, these will be a perfect match in terms of the quality and the functionality of the image, but also you are able to use the same lenses. The lenses are very popular. Since the introduction of the Pocket Camera 4K and cameras like Panasonic GH4 and GH5, we've seen a lot of people using these lenses for cinema and videography users, and a lot of the customer base is steadily growing all the time. So therefore, we have seen as well a large number of third-party producers, third-party manufacturers making lenses for the setup for the system. So we see some dedicated videography and cinematography lenses, even lenses, some specific lenses like probe lenses for macro photography and anamorphic lenses. Then when it comes to motorized, so the MFT system has got a pogo pin, so it can communicate with the lens. So that allows, of course, for the use of autofocus and auto iris and auto and in some cases motorized zoom. So when using now these lenses with accessories such as focus and zoom demand that have been recently released to the market, you've got a full functionality, so you can focus the lens via the focus demand. If you have a motorized MFT lens with motorized zoom, you can use that accessory as well. But not only if you don't have the accessories, you can of course control all these aspects via ATEM software control, or even via hardware panels from the ATEM families. So again, it bodes and incorporates very well with the ATEM technology, with ATEM ecosystem. And of course, another benefit is that all these lenses are quite inexpensive comparing to other lenses such as B4 mount and PL type lenses, and they are small. So that again sits very nicely with the ethos and idea behind these cameras. As I mentioned, the cameras feature dual native ISO functionality. So just to explain a bit more, every camera has got a native ISO function, a native ISO value. So next to the sensor, there's always a hardware amplifier that amplifies the signal coming through the sensor, from the sensor. At the native value, there is no added digital amplifications or attenuation. So you got the best mix of low noise and dynamic range when operating on that native value. When you increase your ISO, then it digitally amplifies the signal, but it also amplifies the noise. So that's why we also added. So the first native value is ISO 400, which uses the first amplifier, first chipset. But then when you increase the ISO, when you go over 1,000 ISO, it switches to the next amplifier. So you will see that the second native value is 3200 ISO, and at this value you got now 400 and 3200 ISO values that are native to the camera. So by native means that you get the optimal level of dynamic range, brightness of course, and low noise levels. So when it comes to sensitivity, the camera denominates it in gain or dB rather than ISO, but it works exactly the same. So 400 ISO, that equivalent of 0 dB. So the first native, easy to remember, first native value is 0 dB. Second, that is 18 dB, and that's equivalent to that 3200 ISO. But the whole usable range is from -12 dB, which is equivalent to 100 ISO, all the way up to plus 36 dB, which is equivalent of 25,600 ISO. Every 6 dB is equivalent to 1 full stop of brightness. So if you increase from 0 dB to 6 dB, means that you're increasing the brightness by 1 full stop, and that's equivalent to increasing from 400 to 800. The key benefit of this system is, of course, that it allows the user to operate the camera in much wider range of applications when it comes to the lighting situation. So these cameras have been designed for live production, And as you may know, in live production, you don't have really the control over the lighting. Many cases, you working in very dark studios, dark events with stage lighting, where in order to get a good quality image, you have to sacrifice the dynamic range and noise. So getting more higher noise, introducing more noise into your images. Well, now this can change. I think a lot of people are aware of how highly priced Pocket Cinema Camera 4K is for working in low light situation, and it's no different with now the studio cameras that feature the same sensors. So like example here on the screen, we've got a live event that's been lit with candle lights and some only very subtle lighting from the top. Normally you would be seeing a lot of noise in those dark shadow areas, but with these cameras, when you switch to that higher bank, to that second native value of ISO, you are able to deliver very good quality images without the introduction of higher noise levels. So that's ideal for this type of productions, again, where you don't control the lighting, which is most of the live events in the budget that we operate. So when you look at the back of the camera here, you excuse to think that it looks almost exactly the same as the studio viewfinder that is available as an accessory for ELSA cameras. And you're right in thinking so, because we have adopted the same approach. So of course, it's made for studio. We know it's almost as a kind of operational standard when working with studio monitors. So that's why we use that. So we use that 7-inch monitor that's completely unique to cameras, to have it built in a camera without the need of purchasing additional accessories. It allows to quickly assess images, and so again, when working with stills cameras such as DSLRs, you've got those small screens that are okay to, when you take photos, when you use the viewfinder anyway, and then you can just look at the photos. But when working in live events, you need to be able to respond to changing conditions quickly, and you need to be able to assess the image from the perspective of sharpness, exposure levels, and compositions. At this budget level, we're also talking often about one operator manning multiple cameras. So being able to quickly assess the qualities of the shot from a certain distance is very, very useful. The screen is, of course, touch screen, and it's got this feature, the same access to the same Blackmagic OS system that is known from other Blackmagic cameras, which again is prized for its functionality, ease of use, and intuitiveness. Again, in terms of the resolution, it's 1920 by 1200 pixels. That extra line of pixels on the top to display the main aspects of the camera, such as shutter speed, iris, ISO, white balance, frame rates, etc., without actually overlaying it on the composition. The brightness of the camera, of the screens, we have 600 nits of brightness in the Plus model and 2000 nits of brightness in the Pro model. So we've seen some first differences between the two cameras. So of course, at 2000 nits of brightness, it allows to kind of overcome the glare from sunlight. So when working outdoors, it makes it much easier to see what's happening on the screen. The screen also gives you access to the main common features that helps you with composing, helps you with exposing correctly. So you got false color, zebras, histogram, waveforms, all these built into the camera. Again, you don't often have all of these in DSLR mirrorless cameras without purchasing external monitors. So moving on from the screen, when you look at the sides, of course, we've got these handles that help to operate and pan and tilt the camera. And then the physical buttons. On the left-hand side, we've got 3 functional buttons that you can assign some common functions to. So we can, again, quickly switch them on and off. They illuminated, so they tell you which function is active and it isn't, which isn't. Program return button, again, in combination with the screen, very useful when working, for example, on a green screen and in live events where you, in real time, keying the green screen and replacing it with your background of choice, or even in virtual studio setups with 3D graphics. When you activate the program return, rather than looking at just green image with the presenter in the middle, you can an operator can actually see live what the viewers see if the live feed is fed back to the camera correctly. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, you've got these dials, knobs. The first two are for contrast and brightness. These affect the screen only. They're not affecting the image going out of the camera. So again, it allows to quickly change the features, these settings to suit the operator's style. And below there, you also have the, my favorite personally, the focus peaking dial. So when working especially with wider aperture, you may want to quickly switch it on to evaluate the sharpness of the image in critical moments, and you can dial it in more or less, so depending on your needs. So as I say, working with wider aperture, you may want to turn it on more, with or quite the opposite actually, and working with smaller apertures, you may want to tune it down to only show the actual areas that you're interested in. And then once you're happy with it, once you've focused your shot, you can then dial it to the left and fully disengage the focus peaking and get rid of the color overlay that may be distracting. So you don't have to go into menus. You can just, with one twist of the button, you can quickly change the functions that you are working on. So as these cameras are studio cameras, they're designed to output live feed to ATEM or other switches via HDMI or SDI or Ethernet connectors, and they don't have the traditional onboard recording option. So there's no SD card slot, no CFast or CF Express card slot or any other media. Instead, we've got an approach that we feel is offers better quality and is more functional. So you've got two USB-C ports in each of the camera on the left-hand side. Both of these ports are exactly the same, meaning that you can even connect to SSD drives. And the cameras can record 12-bit Blackmagic Raw files in full UHD resolution to those drives with no added chroma subsampling, with a full edge RGB colors. So that's ideal when working with, say, in 8 mini switchers in HD resolutions, and you want to have a higher resolution, high quality version of your program for future use. So as I mentioned, this records to Blackmagic Raw Codec, but some of you may not be too familiar with Blackmagic Raw. So let's have a quick look at what actually it is, how it works, and what's so special about it. When talking about video codecs, traditionally you're talking about like two ends of the spectrum. So on one end, you have the traditional 422 or even 420 video recordings. They're characterized by ease of use, very fast turnaround. So codecs such as ProRes, MP4, MPG, MPEG, H.264, H.265. These types of codecs are classed as video codecs. You can pretty much play it back on any device, your phone, computer, TV, etc. Easily editable, but again, you don't get too much control over the image in post-production. So any look that you apply to it is baked in, and you have got, and pretty much it's highly compressed. Half of the color data is discarded, and there's no way of retaining it and getting it back. But the good thing is that the main aspect of it is the small size, which is the main driving force for these type of codecs. So you've got a manageable size of files that translate to lower cost of storage and lower cost of capture and archivization. So you get slightly lower quality, more compression and less flexibility, but it's cheaper to work with due to lower cost of storage. And on the other end of the spectrum, we look at that raw codec. So anyone who's worked with photography is definitely familiar with this type of codec. So the raw files, they take data directly from the sensor, there's much less compression in terms of the bearing, chroma subsampling, etc. This is done in the software. So the codec itself, the file itself, you need special software to open it and edit it, but it gives you much greater quality and flexibility. You have much deeper integration levels, so you can change a lot of aspects of your image in post-production. But the trade-off is the much larger file sizes. So it again translates to higher cost of storage and capture. And Blackmagic Raw, it takes the best of two worlds. So first of all, it is a raw codec. It takes the data directly from the sensor and only does a very small portion of the bearing in camera, which means that you've got a full control over your image in post-production. You can change a lot of aspects through the metadata. You can change the gamma type of your shots. You can change the color space. You can work on very deep level of color gradings without deteriorating the quality of the footage. So these are the elements that taken from the raw codecs. What's taken from the video codecs is the size. So when we look at video files, one common almost industry standard file type is the ProRes, not ProRes RAW, the ProRes files. Just like Blackmagic Raw, it comes in different flavors, different types of compression ratios. And when we compare the sizes of these equivalent compression sizes, you see that Blackmagic Raw actually has got smallest file sizes than even ProRes. So you get the full quality, you get the flexibility of working with raw files at a smaller file size. So of course, what it means is you can use you can use the consumer type SSD media to capture your footage, but you also takes less space on your disk for archives. So this translates, of course, the cost of a terabyte of storage consistently gets lower, but it's still quite substantial when we are working on terabytes of files. And as well, one to think about Blackmagic Raw is that it's very much less taxing on your hardware, on your computer hardware, when working with it in post-production when compared to raw files. So we don't need additional special dedicated decoders for it. So only good things when it comes to Blackmagic Raw. Right, let's have a look at some differences between the two cameras now. So as I mentioned, we've got the two models. There's the Plus model that is designed to integrate well with ATEM mini switches for HD production using HDMI connectivity, with the features listed on the screen. So you've got the two USB ports. You've got the same sensor, the same MFT mount. You've got one HDMI connector, the tally light, and mini jack for external microphones, and separate jack for headphones. The Pro model offers the same functionality, but it builds on these. So you've got the same HDMI connector as well, but on top of it, it's really designed to bring that studio style operation and efficiencies to users of ATEM switches based on SDI connectivity. So you've got two SDI ports, you've got two balanced XLR ports, and additional 12-volt port to use different types of power supply. You've got dedicated 5-pin XLR for professional headsets for tally. So that supports, sorry, for talkback, of course, not tally. So the camera supports talkback functionality. So the same starting point as the Plus model, plus additional professional functionalities. And of course, let's not forget about Ethernet connectivity, which is somewhat new for our cameras, which we'll discuss in a bit more details in a few slides. So once again, these are the main aspects of the camera. Big focus on unique studio form factor and the ergonomics. The term studio camera may imply complicated setup and complicated functionality, but the opposite is the case. DSLR camcorders would often have to adopt additional external accessories which hinder the ergonomics and add to the complication of the setup. With this, you've got one contained unit with all the main features that you need in studio production, all built in from the box, out of the box, so without the need of getting a lot of external accessories. And of course, the one big thing is that these cameras work perfectly well with ATEM ecosystem. So when working with third-party cameras, that's the main thing that you, that's one of the things that you are not getting. We look at the key workflows now. So we look at 3 setups in which we believe, and we actually see these cameras already being used, and that's what they have been designed for. So all these setups will use ATEM switchers as the kind of center of the production. These cameras integrate, as I mentioned it many times already, cameras integrate well with these ATEM switches. So something that you do not get when working with third-party cameras. Of course, you can connect these cameras to ATEM and get them as a source of video and audio, but that's it. With these, you get full camera control. So that means that using either the hardware panels for camera control or the switches like ATEM Television Studio, which got some of these functions built in, or with lower, smaller ATEM mini switchers, you got ATEM software control functionality. So what it means that you get access to lens controls. So when working with lenses that are lenses that got autofocus or motorized zoom, you can control these with and as things like iris as well, functions like iris. You can control these from your ATEM, be it software or hardware control. What's important as well when it comes to other aspects of the image, it actually affects the sensor output. So you're not just overlaying some filters on the HDMI feed, which may degrade the quality. You are working on the sensor level. So when changing white balance, changing aspects like lift, gamma gain, these wheels have been moved from, have been borrowed from DaVinci Resolve. So very professional level of integration. These not degrade the picture quality. Hopefully I'll get the chance to demonstrate it shortly. You can of course scale your production depending on the combination of ATEM switcher and a studio camera that you choose. So first off, we have a setup that uses ATEM Mini Pro ISO as the main switcher. And combined with studio cameras 4K plus. We've got 2 cameras on the diagram, but we can use, of course, up to 4 cameras in this setup. You've got 1 HDMI cable between each of the camera and the switcher. We know that HDMI is a bi-directional communication, so you only need 1 cable. The cable length is up to 10 meters. This kind of setup is ideal. It has been ideal for small studio productions such as podcasts, magazine shows, and interviews, where cable runs are short. So we've got up to 10 meters of HDMI cables. The camera detects the fact that it's connected to the ATEM switcher and will switch to HD mode, so it will deliver video in HD resolution. Multi-camera setup, of course, can be managed centrally from the ATEM software control. As you see, each of these cameras is combined with an USB-C SSD drive. Again, commonly available in any electronic stores. HyperDeck here can be used either as a recording option or to store, as a source of video. And we also have a USB-C drive, this connected to the ATEM, which records a compressed version of your live show. The ATEM broadcasts streams live to social media platforms via Ethernet. and it's got presets for most common social media platforms and streaming platforms. So the technical simplicity in this setup of studio cameras complements the ease of use of 8 and mini switches. So the operator in this kind of setup can focus on and concentrate on the creative output rather than fighting with technology and working with technical difficulties. So very simple setup, and you've got full camera control, you've got tally, you have full Blackmagic Raw UAG recording in cameras to use to SSD drives and HD resolution of your stream. Again, you can use up to 4 cameras. The reason why we presented with the 8 Mini Pro ISO is that we think that it functions very well with these cameras. 8 Mini Pro ISO records ISO files to the connected SSD drives. So as I mentioned, these records compressed H.264 files into the SSD drives. You get one main file is your SSD program output. So you got the ISO program output, which basically records whatever you are sending to your viewers. This contains all your cut points from your cameras, but the ATEM switcher also records a separate channel for each of the camera connected, each of the source connected, and it continuously records even when the camera is not live. So you got the same amount of files as channels. So when working with 2 cameras, you've got 2 files to ISO H.264 files for each of the camera, plus that third one being the program output. So that means that you can recut your program. So if you, for example, you look at it later, you watch the camera outputs and you see that, well, another angle of a camera, another camera could have worked better in this certain cut, you can recut it fully and deliver a completely new version of your live program. It also records a DaVinci Resolve project file, DRP file. So when you open this file, this project, it opens the DaVinci Resolve project with all these channels already implemented in it. So you got all these. It's a multi-camera setup, so you can edit it later. But as we mentioned, we also have got these Blackmagic Raw files that come from the camera that were recorded into those SSD drives. So these come into play now. With one click of a button, you can replace those ISO compressed files with the Blackmagic Raw files. So this brings a completely new level of functionality. So now your show has concluded. You've delivered your live content, but you've got now a completely new version of your show for later use in much higher resolution, so full UHD resolution, in Blackmagic Raw quality. So you can go into great lengths in color grading. You can change the aspect of the exposure. If you decide that maybe certain elements were actually overexposed, you can change the ISO of your files, of your videos after you finish the recording, and create a new version of your show, recut it. You don't have to, of course. You can keep the same cut points if you're happy with them, and then you've got it for later use. Whether you can archive it, on your website, or you can share it with your viewers on social media platforms. So huge functionality that's only really been present in high-end productions. You've got it now. You can have it in your home and in your own small studio. Second setup, we now switch from HDMI infrastructure into the SDI infrastructure. So SDI is a single directional. So you need, as you see in the diagram, you need 2 cables per camera to get one going from the camera to the switcher, which transfers video and audio data, and going back, you've got tally, talkback, and camera control. Of course, for the SDI, we need to switch from Plus model to the Pro model of the studio camera. And you now gain the functionality of professional audio as well, so you can connect XLR microphones directly to each of the cameras, and you can connect professional talkback headsets, so those pilot style headsets. This kind of setup is ideal for big brand magazine shows where image quality is paramount, and for events captured such as live performances and conferences requiring longer cable runs. So SDI has got a maximum cable length of 100 meters for 12G SDI, so 4K up to 60 FPS. We got a cable limit of 100 meters. So all these cameras that you can see on this diagram can be 100 meters away from the switcher. So great for studios using multiple smaller studio rooms. In terms of the switcher, as we move now to SDI connectivity, we're using ATEM Television Studio Pro 4K, which got some functionality for camera control there as well, built in, and a multi-view also built in. You need a web presenter 4K now to stream the 4K quality from this streamer, from this switcher. A director can operate this, or can be in the same room as the operator, connected directly to the switcher without any of for external talkback converters, and it all works together. HyperDeck then is connected here for to record your stream for later use. Again, you're getting full camera control functionality. So from the switcher level, you can change aspects of the image, such as frame rate. Sorry, not really, well, frame rate as well, yeah. But shutter speed, white balance, iris control, and focus control when working with automatic lenses. Let's stop for a second. Before we go to the next setup, let's look at the Ethernet connectivity. So I mentioned broadcast TV studios and live events outside broadcast that use SMPTE fiber connectivity. So you've got these thick cables, the optical fiber cables that carry video, audio, and all the ancillary data. So power for the camera, talkback, tally, and camera control. Using one cable simplifies the cable loom. It allows using long cable runs and one cable per camera, rather than three or even four in the previous example. We apply this principle to a more affordable Ethernet solutions. So it uses affordable Cat6a Ethernet transmission, so cables that are available in any electronics store, and the cable run is up to 70 meters, but it does require a fiber converter for each of the camera. These the studio converters, the box will be available later this year or at the beginning of the next year. So this is the diagram that shows this kind of setup now. Very similar to the previous one, but now it adds those studio converter boxes. It's great for larger venues that require longer cable runs beyond the limit of HDMI 10 meter, but where deploying an SDI loom is not convenient or is not possible. So great for houses of worships and conferences, which typically require longer cable runs. Again, studios that already have Ethernet infrastructure can take advantage of it and use this to connect these converters now. But it's not to be confused with video over IP. This is not the same as NDI. It uses a TCO connectivity, slightly adapted by us. So you do need a converter. The benefit of it is like you can have the converters next to the switches. As you see, the output from the converter is still the SDI cable. So you can have a very short, really 10 centimeters cables from the converter to the switcher. Again, 2 per box, and then only one Ethernet cable going up to 70 meters going to the cameras. These cables, again, just like fiber cables, they transmit video, audio, tally, talkback, and power for the camera. So you don't need any other cable. So you use the power of Ethernet plus technology, and you're able to just connect it simply to the camera without the need of additional cable. So very useful, very efficient in terms of practicalities. Here on the screen, we've got again the comparison, like one screen comparison between the two camera models, between the Plus and Pro model. So once again, the Plus model has been designed to work with ATEM minis, which is predominantly on HD resolution. It's got that HDMI connectivity, and the Pro model, it adds more functionality, more professional connectivity. So we've got now SDI, XLR, TalkBack, and Ethernet all in one camera. But what's shared technology? The same sensor, the same micro four thirds lens system, 13 stops of dynamic range and dual native ISO. So in terms of the quality of the image that you're getting from both of these cameras is exactly the same. Extremely again useful when coupling this with other cameras such as Pocket Cinema Camera 4K that you may already have in your studios. So we get into a summary now, but we also want to talk about three cases where these cameras have already been adapted in real life by larger productions. So first one would be is What Culture UK. This is a YouTube firm. It's not so much, I wouldn't say a channel, because they have actually 12 YouTube channels, including the world's biggest unofficial wrestling website. And they reach a monthly audience of over 10 million viewers every month. They're a great example of content creators that are taking the opportunity to step up their production quality and capabilities as part of their expansion plan. They have recently expanded into new premises, and they created 5 bespoke studios. So they've got 3, and each of these studios is equipped, is specifically designed to produce a different type of video content for the channels, including live streaming and podcasts. So you've got 3 studios that are equipped in Studio Cameras 4K Pro, and 2 Infinity green screen studios that are equipped with Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. They all work on HDMI connectivity, and Phil Chambers, who works at What Culture, tells us the multi-camera setup gives the greater scope in what they can do to make content more engaging for an audience, and are able to react to breaking news by producing a live streaming news video or podcast instantly from the Blackmagic Studio cameras. He also gives the cameras a resounding endorsement by saying that as for the quality of the cameras themselves, the sensors are exceptional. The prime lenses lend our production a cinematic depth of field, and frankly, they destroy everything in comparison to the cameras that we were using before. Second example would be a company called BS Streamen from Germany. They have a studio based in the Studio Babelsberg, based in Potsdam, Berlin. They recently acquired 3 Studio Cameras 4K Pro and ATEM Production Studio 4K. They also use ATEM Mini Pro ISO, and they recently worked with German singer and songwriter Dagobert Weiss in the remote Norwegian log cabin to support the future launch and promotion of an album. Despite the obvious technical challenges, they were able to live stream the performance from that remote location in Norway, and they have subsequently done multi-camera productions, and will soon be covering multiple stages at the MediaTek Hub conference in Berlin, all of which require SDI-based infrastructure for long cable runs. They'll also be streaming the seminars to reach wider audience. And Robert Clicks from VS Streamen, he's a team lead, technical team lead at VS Streamen, told us that the Studio Camera 4K Pro today production, adding the Studio Camera 4K Pro to the day production workflow means that they can build a high quality streaming setup in half the time. He also told us that having Tally, TalkBack, and camera remote control built in gave them the professional broadcast features, all within a compact and intuitive design, so all built in, contained into the camera without the need for additional accessories. So very useful when working in remote conditions with where you are limited in the capacity of the equipment that you can bring with you. And the last example would be the Pan-African Christian University from Nairobi, Kenya. I had a great pleasure of having this seminar with them as well. They're very passionate people. They purchased multiple studio camera 4K Pro cameras along with 8 Mini Extreme ISO for the new studio in the Department of Communication, Language and Linguistics. The multi-purpose studio is supporting a number of different university activities. So first of all, they deliver the live educational content to support more of 3,500 students that participate in the lectures. But they also record these for future use. So again, 8 Mini and Extreme are very useful for that. And they create a different version of the content using the recordings from Blackmagic Raw. The students also use the system outside of the studio environment to produce multi-camera coverage of the university's weekly chapter service, which are streamed by the 8 Mini Extreme ISO directly into Facebook. So again, this allows them to reach the wider audience at homes with the really good image quality and functionality of studio cameras. And that's useful for the operator side. So a quick summary, we have covered the differences now between the cameras. We have learned what they have in common. So the sensor in these cameras and the lens mount, the capability of working with ATEM software control and ATEM camera control. So we know now how they work on either HDMI connectivity or SDI connectivity, depending on the camera model and depending on the switcher that you use. So you know how to take advantage of these functions when delivering your live shows. So it's time now for the Q&A section. So I'll hand it back to George. But on the screen, actually, let's go back to it. On the screen, you can see the email address. That's presales-emea@blackmagicdesign.com. So any questions that you have before you purchase either of our products, if you want to ask us questions and allow us help you to select the right products for you, then feel free to email us. And we'll be happy to get back to you as quickly as possible. But now I will, of course, try to answer your questions live. So now I'm back to George.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tom. Very eye-opening session. We appreciate your time. We appreciate all the effort and everything you went through. I hope to everybody watching this in the future on YouTube or Instagram or wherever may this go, I hope it was fruitful for you. We have a couple of questions, sir. I'm going to run them by you, please. The first one is from Mohammed. He is asking, what are the platforms that are working with ATEM at the moment, and how many platforms can we go together live on simultaneously?
So simultaneously, you can do one platform. In terms of what platforms are supported, pretty much all of these. So built in, you've got presets in the ATEM software control. Allow me to open it so that I can remind myself as well what they are.
Facebook, Twitch, Skype, and
exactly.
YouTube.
Yeah. And I'll try to show it to you as well. So I just move it to the second monitor, and if I here we are. So in this ATEM software control, in the switcher panel, under outputs, you've got the platforms that you can select that you want to stream to. But there is also, these are just presets. There is also, you can edit the XML file and add other platforms that are not here. So that's why I'm saying that all platforms really in the world are supported. They just presets. And if you want to stream to multiple platforms at a time, then you need to use platforms such as Restream AI, that they will duplicate your show. So so you can create a preset for Restream, send your feed there, and then they will, as the name suggests, restream to other platforms.
Okay, sir, allow me to translate it to Arabic, please, for our Arabic listeners. So وصل سؤال كم بلاتفورم أم كم منصة بنقدر نبث عليها من الآتم ميني، وكم منصة بذات الوقت كمان فينا نبث عليها. فكان الجواب هو إنه جوات سوفت وير الآتم نفسه حتلاقوا في كذا بريست تقدروا تختارون بيتوافقوا مع معظم المنصات الموجودة حاليا، مثل فيميوس، تويتش، يوتيوب، سكايب، فيسبوك يعني. وعم بقول مستر توم انه كمان تقدروا تعملوا editing للاكس ام ال فايل تبع البلاتفورمز، وانتم تعملوا your own preset وتكنيكلي تبثوا لوين ما بدكم. بالنسبه لكم منصه، على كم منصه فيكم تبثوا بذات الوقت، كان جواب مستر توم هو انه تقدروا بس تبثوا على منصه واحده من الاتم ميني دايركتلي، ولكن في ويب سايتس تقدروا تدخلوا عليهم وتستعملون، وهالويب سايتس هن بيعملوا ريبليكيشن، اي بيعملوا شو بقولوا بيعملوا نسخة عن الستريم تبعكم وببثوا لكم إياه على المنصات الثانية. Thank you, Mr. Tom. For the second question, please. This is from Mohannad. He says, I am a happy user of Blackmagic Design Atom Mini Pro, mainly in corporate facility as a training center, and I really like the features, but still wish Blackmagic Design opens the cooperation with third companies like Loopdeck to allow easier workflow of one-man show, like inserting graphics and lower thirds easily. So he's asking, is this happening soon, where you guys will allow third-party, let's say, the decks, live decks, for people to be able to use them to insert graphics or anything they want to add to their stream?
So I think Loopdeck is that kind of that works on, and it connects you to a computer, and you got macros, right?
Yeah.
That you can activate. So the Atom software control, it comes with a developer SDK files, which means that you can actually, with a bit of programming knowledge, you can program and configure these with other accessories. So we have seen, for example, users adding foot switches where they are able to activate those functions with a foot switch. So it is possible to a certain degree as well. Then, of course, you've got the media panel in Atom. Depending on the Atom model, you can select some picture-in-picture already from the panel itself. And then, of course, softwares like OBS and vMix and other popular platforms softwares that do have this functionality as well. We don't have macro buttons that are natively supported in the Atom panels. So we already passed this feedback to our developers to ask if maybe there's an option to incorporate, to add some programmable buttons that are not specifically related to the camera or the Atom software control, but they can work with third-party products. But again, in terms of any plans with Blackmagic Design, our company policies that we don't really announce our plans much in advance. So it is possible, definitely, and we have recently asked for this for the developers. Whether it will be implemented, we will see when next versions of Atom panels and Atom mini panels are added in the future.
Okay, allow me to translate it, sir. So اجانا سؤال هل رح تسمح شركة Blackmagic ل third party accessories مثل Loopdeck اللي فيكم تستخدمون طبعا باللايف، في الجاتو، في يعني عدة accessories. فالسؤال كان هل رح تسمح شركة بلاك ماجيك لهالديفايسز يشتغلوا مع الاتم بشكل سلس وسموث؟ وكان الجواب هو انه بداخل سوفت وير الاتم في بروجرامبل ماكروز. فيكم انتم بشويه بروجرامينج نولج، اذا بتعرفوا شويه برمجه تقدروا تبرمجوا هالماكروز لتستخدموهم مع اللوب ديك لتصير اللوب ديك تعمل تريجر لسيرتن فانكشن بدكم اياها. وعطى مستر توم اكزامبل انه في ناس برا قدروا يستعملوا فوت سويتش اللي هي بادل بتتحكموا فيها بالرجل ليعملوا سويتشنج على الكاميرا من دون ما يضطروا يكبسوا الزر قدام الكاميرا، فحطوهم تحت الطاوله مثلا هن عم يعملوا بودكاست ولا وات ايفر، وصاروا يستعملون ليبدلوا بين السورسز. فهالميزه موجوده، بالاضافه انه طلبوا من الديفلوبرز، عم بيقول لنا مستر توم انه يضيفوا على النكست جنريشن من هالسويتشرز يضيفوا عليهم زرار تكون ما خاصه لا بالكاميرا ولا بالاتم، ولكن تعنى فقط بفانكشنز تقدروا انتم تبرمجوها لتقدروا تستخدموها باللايف ستريم تبعكم، تختص بالجرافيكس ولا ايا كان اللي بدكم. Yeah, we have a third question, Mr. Tom. I'm gonna read it to you now. To ease the process of a simple press of physical button instead of opening multiple software.
Yes,
I don't know.
I understand. So the programmable macros where you can program functions to your loop deck. So loop deck is not obviously it's not a dedicated broadcast product. It's a computer accessory which you can program each button to do other things. And I'm not sure if specifically loop deck has been implemented with ATEM Mini or any ATEM switches through the developer SDK. But as I said, I have seen some examples of using third-party devices. But as I mentioned, we are constantly feeding this back to our developers, asking, is it possible to kind of make a mix of ATEM and loop deck? But I cannot discuss any plans about this.
Amazing. One last question that is a bit personal. It comes from my side. Should somebody go and buy the Atom Mini Extreme now or wait because in like a month you guys are releasing something? Because I remember buying my ATEM Mini and then after 2 months you guys releasing the ATEM Mini Pro. And then I went and got that one and, sold the other one. And then a month later, you guys announced the Pro ISO. I'm like, what's going on? So for anybody who's on the market to purchase, other than getting a great deal on the ATEM Extreme Pro ISO, like for example, let's say if it's included in next week's cyber deals with AAB, should they wait or should they go get it for now? Everything's safe.
Even if I knew, I wouldn't be able to answer it. But we don't find out about new product releases very, very far in advance. So I'm not aware of any work being done now, any plans to release new ATEM switches soon. We did have plans to release some products on the IBC show, which have been cancelled. We don't know what products they were though, so it has been kept secret even from us. So you may expect some products being released in the next 1 or 2 months, but I'm not sure if it could be completely different. Could be a camera, could be something else. Yeah. But you may want to then, in that case, you may want to wait and see whether it's one of the items, and if so, then decide whether you want to go with it or the new one. And if it's a completely different, unrelated product, then it just shows that it will be a bit more time before we release a new item.
Yeah. But also to add to people, what I love about the Blackmagic products is that every new product released is it's an add-on. Like you guys add more features to the product, but you don't strip it away from the previous functions. For example, for the ATEM, What I love is the fact that you added, well, here's an extra thing for those who are looking for specifically that. And then with the ISO, you were like, okay, but here's another thing for people. So even if you are on the market today, for people who are watching, you are on the market today and you want a switcher slash, I'll call it a bridge between your camera and your live stream, the ATEM in its current versions are more than enough. If you are going to wait, just wait. Maybe there's a specific function you have in mind and you wanted to see if it's in the new iteration of the ATEMs. However, the current versions are fully capable and fully, I might say fully enough. Like they're more than enough for the live streams. Like I even admit switching from the Pro to the Pro ISO was just a spoiled move on my part, because the Pro is enough. Like I've never used the XML file after my live is done, you know, but I just got it. I'm like, maybe. So if you're on the maybe side of things, no, just go get even the mini, the normal mini or the Pro or the Pro ISO. Any of those is really more than enough. So this question was just more for me because I'm planning to get the extreme ISO. I just wanted to make sure I don't want to get into a shocking phase like it happened last time.
Yes, and you will see as well that with any products that we release, especially ATEMs, when we release new ATEMs, they did not replace the previous models.
Yes.
They were just they're just an additional. They give you more choices, more options. So all ATEM Mini is still relevant. It's still very popular, and it's still being sold. Even though we released a new, more powerful version of it. So it did not make the first model obsolete, and the pricing of that model, well, obviously pricing changes with time, but when we release new products, it didn't mean that we're releasing it at the same price as the previous one, and the previous one therefore lost a lot of value, as it sometimes happened. In this case, the value of these products remained the same as we were releasing additional ones.
What's insane to me is that these devices like this, what you hold in the palms of your hand, now replaces I might say a $20,000, $30,000 setup to do just the same thing just 5 years ago. I'm not going to even travel back in time and say 20 years ago. I'm just going to say 5 years ago, this used to be $20,000 setup to be able to take 4 cameras live and record them and. It was a $20,000 setup, and now it fits literally in the palm of your hand. You needed a lot of accessories like what do you call it? Adapters, splitters, all of that. Now it's just one small device, and that's, I think, the brilliance of Blackmagic and what you guys are doing, and that's why people are in love with the products. And thank you, really. And thank you for today's session. It was really eye-opening. A lot of information was shared. We thank you for your time, Mr. Tom, and hope we can do this again with the people watching. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the information. Thank you for putting all this together. Thank you for Blackmagic. And of course, a huge thank you for AAB. With this, we conclude today's session. Hope you guys had a plethora of information that you can go through later. This video will be on YouTube, might be on Instagram, Amr. We don't know, but it will definitely be on AAB's World channel on YouTube, where you can go and look through this information, skim through it again, and see and how you can apply it to your own setup. Thank you very much. Please stay tuned as well. Next week, AAB has Cyber Deals Week on their website exclusively. Blackmagic products are included, so stay tuned. And شكرا كثير لحسن المتابعة. نتشكر وقتكم. نتمنى تكونوا استفدتوا من هالمعلومات كتير اللي شاركها معنا مستر توم من شركة بلاك اللي بنوجه لهم شكر كبير، هن وشركة AAB أكيد، على تنظيمهم لهالندوة إذا بدكم أونلاين يلي شاركنا فيها مستر توم بمعلومات كثيرة عن كيف تقدروا تستخدموا برودكتس من بلاكماجيك لتعملوا لايف سيت اب. هالفيديو رح يكون موجود على يوتيوب، تقدروا تحضروه وتشوفوا الانفورميشن على راحتكم. وإذا عندكم أي أسئلة بليز، مستر توم بقلب اللايف ستريم حط إيميل فيكم تبعتوه، أم حتى فيكم تبعتوا لي إياهم للأسئلة، أم حتى تبعتوهم لAAB ورح نجتهد إنه نجاوبكم على الأسئلة على قد ما بنقدر. شكرا كثير حسن متابعتكم، نتمنى تكونوا استفدتوا، ونتمنى إنه نقدر نعيد هالويبينار على موضوع ثاني مع شركة بلاك ماجيك بالقريب العاجل. ما تنسوا الأسبوع الجاي AAB عندهم سايبر ديلز حصريا على الموقع تبعهم، مطرح ما فيكم تدخلوا وتشوفوا عروض على أكثر من 600 أم 700 منتج. طبعا ضمنهم رح يكون في برودكتس من بلاك ماجيك فيكم تشوفوها، فعجلوا رجعوا احضروا الفيديو إذا قفيتوا شيء منه، وشوفوا شو ناقصكم لتقدروا تشتروهم بالسايبر ديل ويك. Thank you very much, Mr. Tom. Any last thoughts you might want to share before we wrap it up?
No, I just wanted to say thank you as well. Thank you, George, and the rest of the AAB team. It was a really pleasure. Really happy to be with you. Thank you for anyone attending from the viewer side. And once again, we'll aim to do these sessions more often. We quite regularly do sessions on DaVinci software, DaVinci Resolve, but we want to aim to do these sessions for other products as well. So as the companies that were subject of my presentation, we also adapt to changing conditions, but hopefully I will get a chance of one day perhaps maybe visit you in Kuwait in the and get a bit of the Middle Eastern sun and the cool, nice air. So once again, thank you very much, and hopefully see you next time.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.